All right, moving on. Is there a Khalistani resurgence taking place? Simply put, a revival of the Sikh nationalist movement that was considered defeated in India in the 1990s. The reason to ask this question is the development in Canada and Australia. 14 Gurudwara management committees in Canada, Ontario province have imposed a ban on the entry of Indian government officials to Gurudwaras under their control. They've used a local law against trespassing in order to implement such a decision. Now, the decision itself was taken at a meeting of Jyoth Prakash Gurudwara in Brampton on the 30th of December. However, there will be no ban on any Indian official paying a personal visit to any Gurudwara run by these committees. Reports quoted a spokesperson of the concerned Gurudwara committee in Canada, Amarjeet Singh Mann, as saying, and I quote, "We have just made it official. Indian officials were not allowed to speak or organize any function in any of these 14 Gurudwaras even in the past. But that was a kind of unwritten understanding within the community. But now we have made it official as we found that Indian government officials were trying to interfere in our functioning. But our decision will nullify all such attempts by Indian government," unquote. All right, and staying on the story, in recent years, the Indian High Commission in Canada has been making attempts to improve ties with the Sikh diaspora, which had been affected since Operation Blue Star in 1984. The latest development has come as a setback to these efforts. Series of meetings were held by these committees since December 9 before taking the final call. A press note released by the Gurudwara management committees to explain the decision said, and I quote again, "Pursuant to the Trespass to Property Act 1990, the management of these Gurudwaras reserves the right to bar entry to officials of the Indian government, including but not limited to Indian elected officials, Indian consular officials and members of organizations who seek to undermine the Sikh nation and Sikh institutions," unquote. Now, the press note from the Gurudwara management committees said exactly this, that the decision taken by the Canadian Gurudwaras is not an isolated one. In November, A.C. Gondane, the Indian High Commissioner to Australia, was stopped by pro-Khalistani protesters from entering a Gurudwara in Melbourne. Now, the protesters told the envoy that they would welcome him as a private citizen and accord him the respect they will give to anyone else. But he was not allowed into any Gurudwara in Melbourne as an Indian consulate member. All right, I'm joined by Molly Gambhir from the WION newsroom. Good evening, Molly. What do you make of this development, and will it jeopardize Prime Minister Trudeau's much anticipated visit to India?
Certainly, Ramesh, we've been seeing a lot of back and forth taking place when it comes to the Sikh diaspora in Canada. Remember, the Indian High Commission in Canada, as you also just mentioned, has been making several attempts to improve ties, and in the back of that has been holding several meetings, holding several rounds of consultations and making concerted efforts in that direction. But this ban on Indian officials certainly comes as a huge jolt to that direction, to that attempt that has been made by the Indian High Commission in Canada. This is a decision that was taken after several rounds of meetings. And also very important to highlight here that there's no ban on Indians visiting Gurudwaras in person capacity. Of course, it's only those Indian officials who have been banned as a result of that decision that was taken on December 30th. As you rightly pointed out, this definitely comes as a development which will impact the ties that have definitely been bolstered between India and Canada. But this definitely is a move which is being criticized not just by the Indians in Canada, but across the international community, especially in India, when we're looking at, as I said, ties between the two countries improving. But this definitely is a setback on that front.